issue, another vintage issue. This is April 1996, I believe, although I'm still confused by the years. I haven't quite got used to this new year since we turned around. What's the date? What's the date? Doesn't actually say. Does it not say? Anyway, I think issue 196. Anyway, I think we're in 1996. Let's do it. Here we go then, straight on into White Dwarf 196, April 1996. This is now Big Fat Dwarf, chunky with card inserts, and the new White Dwarf mascot on the cover. I can't say that I prefer it to the John Civic Hero Questy White Dwarf, but definitely more in keeping with the kind of comic, bold, colourful look that Games Workshop have now adopted. As always, this is a nicely tattered, dog-eared version because this was mine originally from April 1996, and it has been well thumbed through, read, dissected, investigated everything else. I think actually this might have been my first nod to Edgar Allan Poe, that this homage poem written here about the Eversaur assassin might have been what first prompted me to look into Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know, maybe I was reading it before then, but certainly pointed me in that direction. Here are some new additions. Brian Nelson starting sculpting these orcs that are moving away from the previous Kev Adams edition. You're starting to get the more pronounced jawline, pronounced upper jaw as well. The faces are elongating. They're getting all sorts of tusky, and I'm not keen. I wasn't keen on this aesthetic then, moving away from the 4th and 5th edition orcs. But you know, that's things grow and change and develop. And John Wigley is also joining on an artistic front. Here we have the release of the new Space Hulk, hence we've got classic Blood Angels Terminator there on the front cover. Looking at what's new, Space Hulk, in my opinion, being one of the finest games that Games Workshop have ever released, which is odd considering that it's basically just an Aliens rip-off game. But you know, they've done well, and it has been successfully ripped off by lots of other people since. So I think Games Workshop did it first with the blips and things, but you never know. Maybe they got it from somewhere else first of all. Here's this really nice diorama by Mike McVeigh, of course. Space Hulk diorama that last time I was at Warhammer World was on display in Warhammer World, so really nice to see that up close. Look at all the little details and buttons and gimbals and things that are going on here. Part of Mike McVeigh's basically do whatever you like to keep yourself sane and your painting in our magazine agreement with Star. Here we have some new Wood Elf archers. We'll discuss those, I guess, when we get to the catalogue pages. We've seen how to deal with flying monsters and artillery and other things. Here's a strategy article on both dealing with wizards and taking wizards. In fact, I think didn't we have an article in the last magazine on different types of wizards and different spells that are good to have with them. This is more looking at how to deal with them from an enemy's perspective or from an opponent's perspective. Is that Firebase advert again? We've seen this one previously. It's looking at objective choice in Epic. And here is that big Thunderhawk gunship. You know how we saw the Ultramarines chapter last time? Well, here's a closer look at the Thunderhawk gunship itself, the building of it, the casting of it, and the putting together of it, and the painting of it. Yeah, here's the thing. That what was the the last one that sold on eBay in box, unassembled of course, because assembling them is such a pain in the ass. You almost never see one that's assembled. Oh, what are they at now? $3 something like that for one of these. It's mental. There's parts from lots of different kits mixed in here, of course, as well as lots of built bits and pieces. At the time, the largest thing that they'd ever put into metal, I think, possibly the Imperial Dragon is bigger. Possibly the Citadel Giant is bigger. I haven't seen them side by side, but certainly for this era, that was the biggest and most complicated thing. Certainly the most number of parts of anything that have been put into metal at any time. Some Q&A on various things. Q&A on Necromunda, Q&A on Epic, Q&A on energy fields in Warhammer 40k. Here's Mike Eagle's Chaos Army from the Grand Tournament 1996. Nicely painted Slaneshi force there. Looking at his painting, it's nice sort of, I don't think it is airbrushed, but it looks like it could be airbrushed, kind of graffiti stylo Predator there, which is nice to see, nice different to the irregular heavy metal style. And then here's a look at Gareth Hamilton's Imperial Guard army, which is a lot closer to the heavy metal. You look at these figures and think they were straight out of the Citadel catalogue, cabinets rather, but you know, in fact, this is his private army. He's just painted it very close to the heavy metal style. A nice Warhammer Quest article here on the waterfront discussing port adventures and the start of a series. It's only a two-parter, but two-part series nevertheless, which is going to deal with sailing to foreign climes. So this bit's before you get on the ship, and the next bit will be talking about how you deal with seasickness and being boarded by pirates and all the rest of the stuff. So we've got that to look forward to. This was a nice little series. It's got some new locations, lots of different events that can happen. You can be accused of piracy, you can be bitten by a plague rat, you can fall in the docks, customs officials can stop you, and then of course the obligatory waterfront tavern table. So when you go to a tavern, there's fun things like a hornpipe contest where you as the player actually have to dance a hornpipe in order to influence what happens to your character. You can give them the black spot, you can get sick, you can take part in a drinking contest, dicing with sailors. You can learn a rousing sea shanty, which you can then sing at a later point in your adventure. So yeah, for some fun things there. Here's the empty card sheet that has survived. We see some vehicle cards, and the epic objective tokens was what was in here, and I can't remember what this is, what that came out. Anyway, the card stock is long gone, but the outer bit remains in some kind of perverse opposite of what you would normally expect to happen. Here are Beastmasters for Necromunda, these cool Mediosaurs and Ripperjacks and giant rats. They're also sculpted by Trish Morrison. And rules for Beastmasters. And the Redemptionists. Always confused me why the Redemptionists were a separate thing when we've already got House Cawdor, who are hooded, masked zealots. I guess the Redemptionists just take it a little bit further, but this very much seemed like they were sort of replacing Cawdor, and Cawdor ended up being sort of subsumed into the Redemptionist movement. These are a bit more Ku Klux Klan influenced, with the pointy hats and the nooses and flame motif all over them. I wasn't really keen. I liked House Cawdor because I liked the hooded masked look, the kind of monkish look, but these guys they felt a little bit silly, a little bit too silly. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the Redemptionists when they came out. Here's a look at psychology in Warhammer, how to deal with it, how to use it to your advantage, how to play off your opponent's psychology tests, and also clarifying a few misconceptions that people have been having about when and why you test for various things. Here's that Apocalypse Roadshow advert with, of course, the amazing Sergeant Centurious. I would still love to get hold of one of these figures and paint him up. I think he's really cool. But that's probably because he was one of the first figures that I saw in White Dwarf that was actually being worked on with the green stuff. We saw that in a previous issue, and that sort of set me off on recognizing that these things were actually sculpted at that size. I remember going into a Games Workshop and saying, how does anyone sculpt that small? And being told that they didn't, that basically they sculpted everything big and it got shrunk down, which was true of the plastics. So maybe that's what they were thinking of, but yeah, people were sculpting at this scale, and had I realised that, I'd have probably started sculpting a lot earlier, when my hands were steadier and my eyesight was better, and I might be a better sculptor by now. Never mind. Lots of would have, should have, could have. The J-Files, Jervis Johnson here, talking about various things. Firstly, talking about colour schemes and saying, you know what, we paint them a certain way, but you don't have to. Paint them however you like, which is excellent to hear. Yeah, I mean, this is the case in point, right? The Grand Tournament stuff. Here's some really lovely looking stuff that's painted completely differently, although still in kind of purples and blues, I guess, for Slaanesh, so not too different colour-wise, but definitely doesn't look like an heavy metal army, as up against this one, which is beautifully painted, but looks like a studio army. Anyway, Jervis says, do your own thing. Discusses friendly versus tournament games, which is also interesting because at this point I tend to think of Warhammer and 40k, especially at this time, of being very much all about tournament games, and thereon in always being about tournament games. But here they're discussing the benefits of friendly games and narrative games. So, you know, that old hammer element had not quite died by this point. And then looking at taking special characters in homebrew army lists. So deciding to come up with your own Space Marine chapter and then take all of the special characters from the Blood Angels and the Dark Angels and mix them in together. And Jervis saying, well, technically you can do it, but it's not really in the spirit of thing. You should really be coming up with your own special characters, and you can use one or two as a template, but you really need to be coming up with your own ideas. Come up with your own colour schemes, play narrative games, come up with your own special characters. And he says in here, basically, if you're playing tournament games, you shouldn't have special characters at all. And if you are going to play games with the special characters, you should think of a definite reason why they're being involved, rather than coming up with your own characters who would be involved in that setting, in that event. So good on you, Jervis, trying to get people to be thinking a bit outside of the competitive army list box. We're not nearly there. Look, we've still got quite a lot left in this fat dwarf. It's a good job I'm doing these as a single issue to a video, right, and not trying to squeeze two of these in together. Mike McVeigh's Heavy Metal Masterclass here has this wonderful Red Dragon by Jose Antonio Romero. Look at this thing, it's an absolute beast, and this is all built out of putty over a wireframe. It's absolutely huge, with Eltharion, I believe, riding on top of that. He's got these other cool things. Look at this lovely gribbly screaming bell. Big fan of this one. The colours are just great, aren't they? These are sort of muted. Again, not at all heavy metal style paint jobs. Much more muted, much more subtle, darker. Not grimdark. Not Blanchitsu style. They're very much his own style. Really nice, natural painting. And the Orc Dreadnought with the Space Crusade legs there was just genius. And the overworked putty here on the Lord of Change to make him look all sort of textural. It's really lovely, and this very different take on the Horus Heresy from the Mike McVeigh diorama, with Horus being a big slathering mutant beast here, and Sanguinus in Terminator armour with a pair of wings that definitely couldn't lift him off the ground, but looking really cool. Here's Ian Pickstock's Isabella von Carstein, and Ali Morrison's Gary Morley's giant Deathblow, massive, great self-portrait as a Blood Bowl player. Very fun. Here we have Dryads, for the new and forthcoming Wood Elves. They're just about to get their 5th edition codex, I believe, at this point. Are they? Maybe. Maybe. No, we're still in 4th edition, surely, at this point. Anyway, never mind. We shall see. But here's an extract from whatever the codex is. Maybe, no, it was in 4th edition. Must have been 4th edition. When they appear to elves or men in friendly, alluring aspects, dryads take on the semblance of beautiful, lithe young women with tree-like characteristics. In place of hair, a cascade of green or autumn-coloured leafy foliage flows from their head, and the complexion is green, brown, or even silvery white. Well, that's clearly not what we've got here. So this must only be when they appear in a friendly or alluring aspect. When they go to battle, they take on the form of gnarled tree men, beastie things like this. In fact, they have rules in here for when they are in close combat. They can shift into various aspects of different trees to give them different effects and characteristics. Here's an article on how to create a gaming club in your school. Now, Richard Tunstall here admits he's now at university, so he's just left his school. This is a very childish article. This is very much, I think, talking to 10-year-olds about how they can get their club to put on an after-school session for them. You know, ask your parents. Maybe is this Games Workshop's target audience at the time? Do you think possibly, or is it actually that he's just writing this for the few school kids who might have been watching? But when I was getting this, I was that age. Not, I was a bit older than 10, but I was at school, and so yeah, we didn't have a school club. We had a club that met at weekends in a mate's house. It wasn't at school, and there were only 4 or 5 of us, but never mind, we still got together and played games, and it was fun. Here's another modelling workshop. We've looked at rivers. This time we're looking at bridges. Very cool bridges here. Very simple, but really cool. This one with the skulls on the top is a classic. Seen that in many a White Dwarf. Here's a cardboard bridge, and I loved seeing this made out of just regular corrugated card. I then went and made most of my scenery out of corrugated card and polyfiller, and it all got soggy and collapsed and fell apart. So I don't actually know if this bridge is made out of that, or whether that's a mock-up and they made it out of foam core afterwards. I suspect it is corrugated card, or at least foam core, because under this arch here you can see they've carried on the sort of tiling that's going over the top of the ridge of the bridge there. They've carried it on the underside arch, and the only reason I can think of doing that is hiding the gap where you can see the corrugations in the side of the card, or the foam in the middle of the foam core. But so I suspect this is that bridge, but maybe it didn't get handled quite as aggressively as I did mine. And we've seen this previously, but here's a closer look at this rope bridge that Mike McVeigh did on his Warhammer Quest diorama, and some pools of effluent, in case you should wish to do that. And here is a tournament game. These are 2 winners of 40k grand tournaments, both of which have picked Eldar armies. They're a bit different. There are definitely some differences in these armies, but both Eldar armies, and here they are fighting each other in a battle report, which quite honestly is not that interesting. The battle reports in White Dwarf never really interested me that much. The fantasy ones I used to like looking at the pictures, but reading the text always seemed a little bit dull. I'd rather play. It's like sport, right? I'd rather play the game than read or watch an account of somebody else. I don't understand watching videos of people playing games. Doesn't interest me if I'm not involved in the storyline, if I'm not involved in the game itself. I'm not interested in watching it. I'll read if you do a decent story with actual nicely written prose, I might be interested in reading it as a story, but just as a battle report doesn't do anything for me. But each to their own. There's those Beastmasters for Necromunda and the Redemptionists, and these archers, and these are Ali Morrison archers. And when I first looked at this catalogue page, I thought, oh, they're replacing the sort of Scarlock, Jez Goodwin era you can't beat a Jez Goodwin elf. I'm sorry, you can't top it. Don't even bother. Just keep the other ones in production. I mean, he's got a silly hat on this one. They're all very sort of two-dimensional, flat looking. And then I went back and I looked at the Scarlet's archers, and they're a bit gangled. They're not the best elf sculpts. So I was like, yeah, okay. Actually, the Wood Elves really did need an updated archer at this time. It's just that I'm not sure these really did much better. And the plastic ones that came out afterwards are some of my least favourite plastic miniatures of any time, with the great big cloaks and hoods. But anyway, yeah, it's proof that Golden Age of Games Workshop didn't always produce masterpieces, unlike the ex-Marauder Treeman here, and the other one that I think was sculpted for this, or maybe it was from Marauder and got co-opted, but certainly one of these was a Marauder that's now moved back into the main line. The best ever Snotling Pump Wagon, of course. I don't know, I'm not quite sure why this one's in here. Maybe it got a remaster at this time, but there's not really any discussion of Snotling Pump Wagons at any point previously. Maybe they needed a psychology causing war machine to stick into the pack here, and they thought that fitted the bill. Metal parts for a Predator. Ravenwing Landspeeder. Classic Space Marine Terminators. These are metal ones, so if you want metal ones to go with your plastic, the plastic ones were pretty good, right? I mean, I'm a fan of the first edition of a board game, and the board tiles. I mean, the board tiles in this are lush. Let's have another look. They're by the same chappie whose name I can't remember, but I will look it up. It's definitely in here. I've seen it in here. Richard Wright, there you go, who came up with these tiles. I think these tiles are absolutely stunning, these second edition. He did the Warhammer Quest tiles as well, some of the best dungeon tiles ever produced. So much better than the kind of photoshopped rubbish we get today. All hand painted. Absolutely beautiful tiles. So I am a fan of the first edition of Space Hulk, but I do think this second edition is visually much nicer, and no question with the Terminator models in this edition, far superior to the very strange ones that came out with the first edition. They were clearly struggling with limitations of plastic casting at the time. But the Genestein models are pretty much the same. They've added a couple of different variants, but the original ones from the first edition are still in there. Yeah, great, really cool, very, very fun. But if you want to upgrade, these metal Terminators at this time, also fantastic. And here we are. I'll just zoom in on this final scene on the back here of the Redemptionists versus the Delax. The Redemptionists here facing a really rather large gang of Delax and Beastmasters here. I don't think much of their chances for survival, despite their flamer bits and pieces and their eviscerator. I think these guys are probably going down, but nice complex here. Again, they've done a good job of not really showing too much. There's a little bit of green there, not showing too much of the green base table, but the Goblin green bases remain in nice contrast with this industrial blue. Yeah, lovely. I love seeing these scenes. I think they're very cool. Although the Gothic 40k arches in the back here always seemed like a bit of a culture clash to me. I don't see Necromunda as being a particularly Gothic place. It seems far more sort of heavy industrial to me than having these kind of things would be reserved for ecclesiastical buildings and high level buildings. I don't think the Underhive they'd have gone quite so keen with their Gothic decoration, but who knows? It's all fantasy, isn't it? So there we go, White Dwarf 196. I hope you've had fun. I'll see you next week. Take care.